Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's do chapter 3 of Through a Misted Glass by Dr. David Marsh. I've already done the first two chapters in my past two videos and the responses have been pretty good. Lots of people like this particular book, so very good book. Highly recommend again reading it. I'll include the link for it below in case you wanted to download it for free yourself and then read the book and then enjoy everything that I'm sharing here. But definitely highly recommend it. Chapter 3 has to deal with apparently a cursed car. Fascinating stuff. This is apparently a car that becomes haunted and later starts to create trouble for the user involved. So let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. Chapter 3 from Through a Misted Glass by David Marsh. And again, these are true stories. These are stories that Dr. David Marsh placed within the book of some encounters that he's had from people telling him these stories. So here's chapter 3. Tim needed a new car. He looked around but couldn't find what he wanted, at least in the price range that he wanted. His brother Seth told him to try the sheriff's auction for impounded vehicles. Tim didn't really place much faith in the auctions, but did look at the list of upcoming automobiles that were soon to be auctioned. Lo and behold, there was a car he wanted, a 1971 Dodge Dart. He went to the impound yard and saw that the car wasn't in bad shape and was a car he could restore and drive. On the appointed day, he took his life savings and went to the auction. It was a cold and rainy day, and few people had come to bid on the 8 cars that the sheriff had set up for auction. Tim waited for the Dart and noticed an intense young man staring at the car itself. As the auction progressed and the Dart's time approached, the young man became more and more agitated. Tim asked the deputy if he knew who that young man was, and the deputy replied that the Dart had been that man's car, but he had been unable to pay impound and towing fees. And so the deputy said the young man was forbidden to bid on the car, but he suspected that the other young man with the previous owner was going to bid on the car for that previous owner. Tim asked if that was allowed, and the deputy just ended up shrugging. So the Dart finally came to the auction block, and the previous owner's friend opened the bidding with a modest $100. Tim bid against the man for a minute, the price reaching $350 before that pair stopped bidding, the previous owner glaring at Tim the entire time. The auctioneer dropped his gavel and yelled "sold" and then pointed to Tim. The previous owner suddenly leapt upon the car, pointed at Tim, and said, "I curse this car and every owner from this day on. This car is mine, and as long as it is out of my ownership, only pain and suffering shall any new owner know." And so deputies grabbed that man, dragged him off the car, but not before he was able to take a small jar of paint from his pocket and draw a strange design on the roof of the car. At this point, the deputy's hand cuffed him and then took him to jail. Following the commotion, several people talked about that previous owner, stating he was a practitioner of black magic and witchcraft and had had a troubled youth and was implicated in several mysterious incidences throughout the town. He lived in the northern part of the county, at least over the several years. Tim blew that talk off as idle gossip and meanness on the part of people, and the auctioneer's employees threw a few buckets of water on the car as Tim paid for his project car, and soon that painted symbol was nothing but a puddle on the ground. And so Tim opened the car, inserted the key, never once believing the car would start, but surprisingly it did, and so he took his prize home. Over the next few weeks, Tim spent many free hours working on the car, restoring it to its former glory. Finally, after a year's work, Tim had finished his car. He had a small party to celebrate, and his wife, brothers and sisters, and a few friends came over to see Tim's masterpiece. Many pictures were taken of the shiny, perfectly restored car. The perfect moment came when Tim offered to give everyone rides in the car, starting with his wife. The car started perfectly, and Tim and his wife rolled out into the driveway. 2 blocks away, The car hiccuped once and then started to accelerate on its own accord. Tim attempted to stop the car, even putting it out of gear and then killing the engine ignition, but nothing worked. And so in desperation, he turned into an embankment on the side of the road. Frightened but unhurt, they sat, the car steaming but stopped, dirt from the embankment still making ticking sounds as it fell out of the sky from the impact. Family and friends ran over and everyone helped push the car back onto the road. The car was now undrivable, so Tim towed it back, apologized, and then maybe said next time everyone could have a ride. Tim couldn't for the life of him figure out what happened, and so he carefully examined and tested every part of the acceleration system. He replaced it all anyways with new parts. He repaired the damage to the right front from the impact, all the while thinking about the previous owner. Tim did not believe in the supernatural, but he did believe in self-fulfilling prophecies if someone allowed such things to invade their thinking. So it was with a stern resolve that he finished the repairs and made everything ready when it came to having the car drive again. Again, the car was finished, and Tim decided that the first ride would be solo. He left the driveway one late fall day, carefully feeling the car out for any hint of a problem, and the ride went well. And so Tim shook his head at himself for even being timid over the car. And so he drove the car all that weekend and had no problem. Monday morning, Tim and his son got in the car to take his son to school and then Tim to go to work. 3 miles into the trip, the car once again took on a life of its own and without warning turned down a one-way street. Tim instantly killed the ignition, slammed the vehicle into reverse, and the car died right there on the street. Tim and his son were all shook up, and the angry honks of oncoming traffic brought them out of this shock and forced them to push the car off the road. And so Tim called to have the car towed back to his home and for his wife to come pick him up and his son and then to go to work and school. And after dropping the boy off school, Tim's wife expressed serious doubts about the car and begged Tim to sell it off. Tim thought about that all day at work, and when he returned home, he told his wife he would indeed sell the car. And so Tim posted that car on a car sale website, and many people wanted it. One man named Ron from another state was the person who bought it. Ron was a collector and looked forward to adding that car to the Mini that he already owned. Ron arrived and he inspected the car and made ready, and everything was good to drive it home. And so Tim, his wife, and son were quietly apprehensive about the car, and it was only as Ron was getting in to leave that Tim's son mentioned the curse. Ron just laughed it off and then with a wave ended up driving away. And so Ron got into his own state before the now insidious dart showed itself when it came to its true nature. On the interstate, a few miles from a large metropolitan area, the car once again came to life. Ron said that one minute he was driving along, enjoying the ride. The next minute, the car accelerated and the steering became difficult to control. And so Ron fought the vehicle for several minutes, nearly missing many other cars in the dark's headlong rush down that interstate. He killed the ignition and dropped the vehicle into neutral, all to no avail. Finally, the car swerved off the road and drove down a hillside, careened across another road, and then came to rest several hundred yards into a harvested corn field. Ron spent several minutes just gathering his wits as the sound of distant sirens closed in. Investigators later reported they could find no cause that could substantiate Ron's claims about the car's strange behavior. Ron was not accustomed to being mistaken, nor did he accept the premise that the car could have a mind of its own. And so he had the car gone over from bumper to bumper very thoroughly. No faults were found. Ron would not accept this verdict and proceeded to test the car. And so the car behaved like any other ordinary car for several weeks until one evening when Ron had a date in the car. And again, the car veered off the road at high speed, nearly killing a group of pedestrians, Ron and his date. Again, Ron had the car dismantled, checked completely and reassembled, and again, no fault could be found in the car. The third time the car came to life was at a rally where amongst other vintage cars, as someone simply sat in the car when it was not running, the car suddenly started. It lurched forward and nearly pinned Ron and two others between the Dart and another car. Everyone blamed the person who had sat in the old Dart, but she steadfastly maintained that no, she could not have started it and wrecked the car, as Ron had the only available set of keys in his pocket at that time. And so Ron repaired the car and promptly sold it. This time the buyer was yet from another state and had the vehicle transported to his home state. On the way over, the car slipped loose, came crashing down off the flatbed it was traveling on, and then nearly killed the truck driver and rolled onto a glass slate window of the truck stop he had stopped at. And so upon delivery and much apology, the new owner, Carl, had the damage repaired and promptly took the car off for a spin. On his way home, the car once again showed its true colors and took him on a short but wild ride through a park. Carl faced an enormous ticket and had the car checked for flaws that would cause this erratic driving experience. And of course, no defect was found. Carl was perplexed, but as he had several collector's cars, it was nearly 6 months before he took the now sinister Dart out again. This time, the car behaved properly. However, his daughter had borrowed the car when she was at home on holiday from college, and once again, the car transformed into a terrifying monster. She and a few friends had driven to the beach where they stayed all day, and as the sun set and she decided to go home, the car had other plans, and as she crossed a causeway bridge, the car veered off and somehow jumped the barrier lining the bridge, throwing her and a passenger out before plunging into the water 40 feet below. She and her friends sustained injuries, and Carl, not one to keep such a car, had the car crushed at a local junkyard the next weekend. Carl did not attend. However, the crusher operated, the one that operated it, later told of a horribly abnormal screaming sound issuing from the car as it was flattened. He stopped the machine fearing a breakdown or some other type of catastrophe. He and the yard owner looked the situation over carefully but could not find any reason for that noise. And so just as they turned from where they had been standing nearly inside the car, the crusher seemed to come alive and utterly flatten the car. Later it was determined a failure had occurred in the hydraulics, coming within inches of possibly killing those men. And so thus ended the cursed Dodge Dart. The car, now a cube of metal, was sent to become unusable steel at a mill, and then the yard owner says on some nights that same blood-curdling scream from the Dart can be heard as the crusher finishes its day. Then that's it. That's everything with regards to Chapter 3 from Through a Mystic Glass by David Marsh. So in this case, it had to do with that strange, haunted, almost cursed car associated with the chapter. So let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. First off, the idea of a cursed car has been a popular one, right, when it comes to fiction. Remember, these stories are real. These are real stories. So anything involving this information, even though it may appear it comes from like a movie, it's not. But the notion of a cursed car, you've seen it from so many other movies. Like Christine is one that stands out, and there's usually like TV movies out there with that same notion as well. It comes with the idea that maybe vehicles or some other type of inanimate objects could have a life of their own. And they have, in this case, this curse placed by this previous owner, whoever that young man was that was severely agitated at that auction, knowing that he wasn't going to get the car. And so he stood up on top of that car and then screamed about placing a curse on there and then making sure that he put this kind of strange design on the roof itself. Only information about that young man was that he was someone that was a practitioner of black magic and other type of witchcraft. So who knows how he did it, but he did. And thus that curse followed Tim and then those other owners, those other 2 or 3 owners afterward. I don't know. It's hard to discern if there's truly trouble associated with that car, because obviously the big red flag is it could just be car problems, regular car problems. I used to have a vehicle, very short time period, but I used to have a vehicle that used to accelerate on its own. Had nothing to do with curses. It was just the transmission that needed to have repairs associated with it, but I just never was able to get to that time period or the cost, so I ended up actually trading in the car and getting another one. So hearing at least these tales of the vehicles, accelerating on their own, I know the sensation. It can be a little bit scary at times. Luckily, anything involving that vehicle I had was just the acceleration part. The brakes worked fine, the steering worked fine. There was no me, let's say, going into the middle of a one-way lane or anything like that. No, in this case, it was just trying to fix that stubborn acceleration, but I know the feeling on there. And then the idea that you have this thing that could have been a pet project, in other words, something that could have been restored and so on. I can see why Tim was stubborn about that too, because I've had my very first car ever was a car that I wanted to become, let's say a pet project too. I just didn't have any money at that time, so I ended up trading it in once it started breaking down. But that would have been nice. That would have been nice to be able to restore it to its former glory, as there was a line said in that chapter, and then make it be so beautiful again. So I definitely understand the stubbornness that Tim had when it came to him, even with those several instances, not wanting to sell the car afterward. But finally, the idea that this car is truly haunted comes from that last entry. Once it was getting crushed, once its life was basically gone at that point, withering down to just the last few moments, the fact that a blood-curdling scream comes out of that machine, comes out of the actual vehicle itself, that would be very scary. That would be very spooky. That would be something where it would be, I'm out of there if I hear something like that when it comes to this car. And it tried to kill whoever those guys were that were using that machine there too. But if anybody has any more info on this, please let me know, at least when it comes to other cursed cars that are out there. What do you guys think about chapter 3 as well? Let me know what your thoughts are too. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care.